G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to go through the most effective way to use a foam roller to improve your flexibility. Now we're going to go through two different types of uses for the foam roller, so make sure you hang around to watch both of those. They're probably going to be a little bit different to what you might instinctively be doing at the moment. We know most people have a foam roller. It's a really popular piece of home physical therapy equipment. It's everywhere in the fitness industry, and we use it a lot obviously to improve the range of motion of a lot of our tissues, whether it be our spine, our legs, calves, hamstrings. Some people even use it on their arms and shoulders. So, but what I see clinically is the way that we sort of default to using the foam roller is still helpful because it's existed for so long now. It has to be beneficial, but it's probably nowhere near as effective as what you could be doing to make fast acting change. So instead of spending 45 minutes, half an hour rolling around on a roller, there's actually two other ways that you can do things that are probably going to give you the same, if not better, results in a third of the time, in far less time basically. So hopefully I can show you that today. So the traditional way that we tend to use the foam roller is, as the name implies, we love to roll. So you see a lot of people just rolling the roller backwards and forwards. The idea is that we're trying to sort of shear free and flatten a lot of that soft tissue and try and mobilize that tissue. But it's not necessarily the best way to do things. So when we're looking at something like the calf, a lot of people get quite tight. There's a range of different ways that we can do this. So instead of rolling, so resist the urge to roll, what I'll get you to do is to move the roller around until you feel you hit something that feels a bit tender and tight. You may need to roll a little bit from side to side to find that. So for me, there's a tender spot just here. And what I want to get you to do, make sure you can see this, is it's an active release technique, so or an attack and floss. So we want to find a tight spot, and we want to pin that down, we want to hold that there, and then we want to use movement to shear that tissue free. So what we're doing here is we're compressing the tissue, and then we're using normal range of motion to shear that soft tissue, that fascia, any of those restrictions past that sort of pressure spot. It's a really, really effective way of trying to improve the mobility and the pliability of your tissues. And it can feel a lot nicer too. So what we want to do is we want to do a few pumps, take it all the way up, all the way down. You can have your leg completely straight. You can have it bent a little bit depending on what you feel gives you the best access to your tightness or your tenderness. But the important thing is that you move around till you feel like you hit something that's genuinely important, and just spend a minute or so just working that through, taking it through whatever your range of motion allows, until you feel like that tenderness and that tightness starts to subside. Now we can, what's the tender spot there? We get right into a nice spot here, and what we can do on top of this is, once you've found something that feels quite tight, if you found a tender spot like I have, if you squeeze and tense your calf muscle as tight as you feel comfortable, hold it for a couple of seconds and then relax, you should feel like that tenderness has subsided a little bit. And what we're doing here is, much like a few of the other stretches that we've talked about before, we're using that contract relax model where you activate the tightness, activate the muscle that's tight. It gets your brain involved, and when you activate that fully for a few seconds, it's generally followed by a complete relaxation when you let go. So it's a great way to give your nervous system confidence that you're doing something positive, takes away some of the threat, and you can make some improvements in real time, some genuine change straight away. So if we can find these spots, you can do it anywhere. The most common spot to do this for a lot of people is the ITB. So what we can find here is, as we roll around, if we come over the top here, and I can find a tender spot here. So traditionally we'd be rolling around. Again, we don't want that. It's not a bad thing, but it's not the best thing. So what we want to do here is, once you've found a spot that feels a bit nasty, what we want to do is we then want to move that tissue. So bending that knee, straightening that knee, shearing that tissue free as best as you feel comfortable. And in a short amount of time, you'll feel like any tenderness and any restriction starts to subside. So again, in that position, you can tense your quads, tense your calf, tense your hamstring to engage those muscles, hold it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then relax. And then you should feel like your tissue is genuinely looser and genuinely freer straight away. So that can be done for any part of your body. So that's technique number one. It's a tack and floss, a contract relax. It's a flossing technique basically. I highly recommend doing that. Try and compare the difference between how you would normally do it when you're rolling around and how you do it when you tack it down and floss things through. If you're doing your ITB, if you're doing your quads, your calves, whatever in your lower legs, stand up and do some squats first. Get a genuine gauge of how mobile you feel to begin with. Spend 5 minutes just mobilizing those tissues with the tack and floss exercise. Stand up and squat again, and you should genuinely feel different straight away. If you don't, then you haven't made change, and then you've almost wasted your time. But the key is that you shouldn't feel that way when you're using a foam roller if you're doing things correctly, or not necessarily correctly, but there's a more optimal way to make change that sort of respects the anatomy and the function of your legs. So the second piece to this is when we start talking about the spine. Now, again, when we use a roller, our default idea is that when we lie on a roller, we see a lot of people rolling. This is a common sight at any gym. But again, what this neglects is that the reason why we roll, or the reason why we think we roll, is because we're trying to mobilize the tight muscles and tight soft tissue. Now, what we sort of find clinically is, yes, there are tight muscles and tight soft tissue in the spine, but they're not the primary concern. They're more of a symptom of something else. So just rolling around and trying to flatten those like a rolling pin, it may make you feel better, it may not, but generally it's only going to be short-term symptomatic relief. So you might wake up the next day and you have to do it all over again because you haven't solved the problem. You've just been working on something that's being asked to be there, and we're not trying to tell it to go away. So what we find with most muscular tightness in the lower back, or any part of the back, is that it's generally your brain's protective mechanism for something that's overloaded and stiff with your spinal joints. Or if we're talking about your thoracic spine, your rib cage, the ribs can be involved as well. So generally when you feel muscular tightness in your back, it's trying to support some deeper joint stiffness. And we can use a roller, much like we've done before with the lacrosse ball or a tennis ball. You can use something like a roller to specifically target the stiffness, and as that stiffness frees up, you'll actually find a lot of the muscular tightness goes with it. And how does that look? So if you can imagine that every segment of the spine is obviously divided up, we don't necessarily want to roll because we're not getting any direct pressure into the back. We're sort of getting some broad pressure in general. So the best way to do this is you move around until you feel like you hit something that may feel tight and maybe feel a little bit stiff. So for me, when I'm on my back here, if I roll a little bit to the right, I don't feel anything. If I roll a little bit to the left, it starts to feel a little bit stiffer and tighter. I'm fortunate it's not tender, it doesn't hurt, but it does feel stiffer and it feels like there's more resistance there than when I'm on the other side. So when we're trying to source the cause of most dysfunction, we want to prioritize the side that feels the stiffest. So even if your pain's on the right-hand side, but the exact same spot on the left-hand side or the other side feels stiffer, you actually want to spend more time on the side that feels stiff so that you can unlock that whole dysfunctional mechanism. So, and of course, if it hurts, you don't necessarily have to push through it. It might make it feel worse. So, but coming back to this exercise, once you find something that feels a bit stiff, so for me on that left-hand side, sort of mid-thoracic, we want to basically extend over the top. Now, depending on your flexibility, you may need a pillow or something underneath just to make sure you feel more comfortable in this position. Because what we want to do is we want to stay here. So we want constant direct pressure into that stiffness to allow your body to give over time. So if you're consistently rolling up and down, we're never really getting that constant pressure trying to sink into the joints and get them to free up. We're bypassing that completely. So what you should find is if you can move around until you feel like you hit a stiff spot and then just relax. Again, as I said, prop yourself up with a bunch of pillows if you feel you need to, but you want to feel like you've just got some comfortable pressure on that spot. And like we do with most exercises, we want to incorporate breathing into this. Particularly where I am in my rib cage, I need these ribs to move just as much as the stiff spinal joints. So what we want to do is we want to take a deep breath in. We want to hold that and we want to squeeze. We want to tense up your abs, tense up the muscles in your back, tense that whole trunk up, hold it for 5 to 10 seconds, and then relax. And what you should find is, much like the calf exercise, it shouldn't feel as tender, hopefully not as stiff. So we can keep repeating that process. Deep breath in, squeeze, hold, and then relax. And then once you feel like you've spent a little bit of time making change here, what we can do then is you can then move it up or down depending on where you feel you need the next attention basically. So, but the key is that you want to stay here and you want to spend some quality time allowing a comfortably dense object sinking into those stiffnesses. Again, if you've got a rusty door hinge, you don't want to roll over the door hinge. You want to grab the door hinge and you want to gently sort of force it to move until it de-rusts, until it starts to give. So again, with this particular way of doing it, before you do this, I'd urge everyone to stand up, arch backwards, bend right to left, get a sense of how free your back feels or your neck feels to begin with. Then spend some time systematically working the roller up and down, biasing one side compared to the other, spending some time there, deep breathing, allowing that stiffness to give, and then to check if you've actually done something. If you stand up and then arch backwards and bend right to left again, you should genuinely feel change. If you haven't, then you haven't done anything. There's no build up over time. You shouldn't have to do this for weeks until you see a change. If you're not seeing an immediate difference, then you haven't made a difference. But the best thing about a foam roller, besides the fact that everyone tends to have one, is that you can make genuine change very, very quickly. But what I'd recommend to most people, including a lot of my patients, is that don't wait for pain to tell you what to do. If you're watching this video, you're obviously interested in it to begin with, hopefully not because you're in pain, but hopefully just looking to improve yourself. But if you can get into the habit of every so often just checking in with the health of your spine, or even the health of your tissues as well, when you're using it through your musculature, it can be a really powerful way to get a strong sense of how you're going. Because we know with pain, particularly back pain and spinal pain, is the moment that you get it isn't the start of it, it's generally the last straw. So it often hides the fact that there's been this build up over a period of time. It's reached a crescendo, it's reached your threshold, and then it becomes uncomfortable. Your body freaks out, it gives you pain. It's reached its point where it can't tolerate that anymore. So, but having a skilled approach where you can hunt around and you're looking for stiffness more than pain, you'll be able to get a great sense of where that is within your body, and then you can address it as you feel you need to. So I highly recommend that. As I said, it's two really, really effective ways to use it. The goal for any of these exercises is to see genuine change. And again, if you don't, I really want to labour this point, you probably haven't done anything. And in a perfect world, if you're doing this consistently, you're doing it with a view that you shouldn't have to keep doing it. So once you feel like you're chipping away at that stiffness should never come back. If it does, then it tells you that there's something in your day-to-day life that's consistently asking that to come back. And if you've been following along with these videos, the simplest explanation for most people are the positions and the shapes that you put that tissue in. So when we're talking about your spine, it often looks like a very unsexy topic of posture. When you're working up and down your spine with a roller, you should find that the spots that feel the most stiff for you are going to correlate with the positions that you're bending through the most. So for me, it's this area that I was just on, and that tends to get stiff for me. It's no coincidence that the areas of stiffness for you potentially coincide with the areas that you need to free up and how that relates to your posture. So if you feel like you want to make genuine change, then make sure that you're using the foam roller effectively, but also taking a step back to appreciate why that stiffness is there in the first place. Because if you can match those two up together, you can set yourself up for no back pain, no stiffness, no tightness, and then all the muscular flow-on effects of hamstring tightness, glute tightness, groin tightness, quad tightness, calf tightness. You can decrease the likelihood that you'll have those because they're not trying to help out the spine and the nervous system. So again, just wanted to touch on that. If you enjoy the content, please let us know below. I'd love to know if you have any tricks or tips to use the foam roller, we can pass that out to the community. If you enjoy the content, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. But until then, we'll see you next time.